Today it's time to talk about Mechanical Animals, and it's that album that follows Antichrist Superstar. It's an album that divides the fans in the world, it divides the world, and once again Marilyn Manson shocks with his usual way of expressing himself. Mechanical Animals is totally different from the predecessor. So this time the band is much more vulnerable, melodic, sweet. The look is completely outlandish again, but in another way. And the lyrics are also influenced by the glam rock of the 70s, especially T-Rex and David Bowie, everlasting influence of our favorite artist, which in this case is Marilyn Manson. The concept is a very compelling one, and it's released from the Nothing Records, but the releasing is split between Nothing Records and Interscope. Trent Reznor is not working this time with Marilyn Manson. Allegedly, there's an influence, a mysterious guy from Smashing Pumpkins, who is Billy Corgan, of course, not that mysterious. However, he is the one who allegedly suggested Marilyn Manson to swerve a little bit and find another point of view of the world, another way to express themselves, take another direction. And in this case, the band did and succeeded. There's lots of promotion behind this album. Before the album was released, and actually when the album was released, Marilyn Manson's cover of the album, which is Mechanical Animals, an androgynous being, is showed in Times Square in New York. A massive image of this alien androgynous showing a bit of breast, asexual, is there in Times Square. The album is released in September 1998, the 15th, and it's a very astronomical success. The first week is number 1 in the chart. It sells 8 million copies altogether within the first year. Great album. Musically it's totally different. The direction is another one, influenced by the glam rocks of the 70s, the glam rocks bands of the 70s. But there's also lots of reminiscence of those goth bands of the early 80s. Bauhaus, Early Cure, and all those post-punk bands like Sister of Mercy and so forth that really influence the artists. The members of the band are pretty much the same from Antichrist Superstar. However, there's a change, and Zim Zam, who didn't record Antichrist Superstar, but he was featuring in the cover of Antichrist Superstar and the pictures, and he also toured with the band in Antichrist Superstar, because remember, Daisy Berkowitz was cancelled. So this time the same thing happens with Zim Zam. So he leaves the band under amicable terms in order for him to pursue his solo career. But then John 5, a guitar player from an industrial metal band called 2, is joining the band. The music in this album is sometimes electronic, sometimes industrial, sometimes glam, sometimes techno with Posthuman, for example. Very deep, and it's an analysis of and a reflection of Antichrist Superstar's tour, and how by the time the band were touring back in 97 and early 98, the singer was pretty much numb to all his emotions. But then he starts to feel emotions again, and now it's time to write about his vulnerable side. He starts to write about what he likes. However, this album is divided in two parts. The part where the protagonist of the album is Omega, the character, an alien who is falling into the world, and he's then put in a band, the Mechanical Animals. And there's the reflection of this character, who is Alpha, which is in turn a reflection of Marilyn Manson, Brian Warner, who is now seeing the people in the world very robotic. He's not really engaging with them. He's not relating to them. He's seeing them as not being able to feel the emotions that he feels. And he criticized them a lot. This album has 14 tracks, and 7 songs see the protagonist Omega, and the other 7 songs see the protagonist Alpha. I should say that the songs where there's lots of irony in it, where there's lots of fakeness as well, that Marilyn Manson is portraying, are those songs which are represented by the character Omega, whereas the other songs where there's lots of seriousness, where there's lots of reflection that talks about depression and alienation, are those songs which are seeing the protagonist Alpha. Mechanical Animals, the song, the title track, is one of my favorites. So this journey is a journey of the character in a troubled world, confused, lots of drugs going on. This confusion is resulting into, to some extent, hysterical songs like Posthuman, where there's lots of scream going on, but then there's lots of sad songs like I Want to Disappear, which is another anthem to this alienation that the character feels. This is that interlude of the trilogy that Marilyn Manson himself declares after releasing the album Hollywood. Is released in 2000, and it's the starting of a trilogy read in reverse, seeing Hollywood and The Shadow in the Valley of Death as the first album, and then the mediation is Mechanical Animals, followed by Antichrist Superstar. Zimzam does lots of great work in this album. There's lots of great guitar solo, and probably this album is the album where that features more solos and much more melodic, and there's lots of blues, to some extent like waltzes, like fundamentally Love Song is a song that it's very atypical from the Marilyn Manson. The album is all atypical, but especially that song resembles a little bit of a waltz, like a rhythm. And once again, the artist here showed the world that there's the capability here to enmesh and express themselves into many different ways. The Last Day on Earth is a very cold song. There's lots of synthesizers inside the song, and very emotional, gothic, cold, talking about this alien who is staying on Earth for the last day, and he will leave, and he hasn't really liked it much. People are very mechanical. Great album. wouldn't compare it to any other albums of the discography of Marilyn Manson because it's totally different. But in its own way, it's magical. It was purchased a long time ago, basically when it was released. And I fell in love straight away. I was one of those fans who came across Marilyn Manson with Antichrist Superstar, and I loved it. But in the same way, I loved that vulnerable part of the artist, which was showed with and expressed by Mechanical Animals. I love that melody. I love that bitterness that turns into sweetness very often. The glamorous, the concept, the booklet that is at some point in reverse, because 7 songs are featured by, as I said, the Alpha character, and 7 songs are featured by the Omega character, who is the alien. Lots of subtleties. In a way, the artist declares on MTV there are lots of biblical passages. Yeah, so Marilyn Manson declares on MTV in an interview that he relates himself to Jesus Christ, whereas in Antichrist Superstar he kind of relates himself to Lucifer. So very archetypical. So he refers to those archetypes that all of us can escape. It reminds me of Jung, that psychiatrist that was very famous and controversial as well back in the early 20th century. He talks a lot about archetypes, those archetypes that none of us can escape. God is the father of all goodness, whereas Satan is the father of all evil. But all of us embrace a bit of evil and a bit of goodness. We're all able, to some extent, to do something bad when circumstances arise. And Marilyn Manson is not strange to that. So he portrays these kind of human characters and he makes them very graphic and shows that men in general are capable of all sorts of stuff. None of us are immune to stuff like that. The good thing is that we're in control of our bad emotions. As long as we recognize that to some extent we can get to the extreme as human, then we're more in control of it. So that's the message that it's very subtle in Marilyn Manson throughout his career. But I gathered there's lots of aspects that then reflect my conclusion. However, with no further ado, I will leave you in this episode, and I wish you a lovely listening because I'm sure you will love this incredible album. For those of you who like more sweet approach to music without too much abrasiveness and violence, this is very accessible and I really recommend it to all of you. To all of you who listen to more melodic music than anything else. On the other hand, have a bit of interest into this world of this artist who has been around for more than 3 decades, who is really, really worth my respect. Okay, have a lovely continuation to whatever you're doing, and remember to subscribe whenever and wherever you want and you are. See you soon.